This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by GoDaddy.com and Netflix.com.
So it's been 10 years.
10 years.
Since Marvel Knights. Punisher's still going.
Yep.
Ongoing Black Panther.
Yep.
Ongoing Daredevil, obviously.
Yep.
Right.
Where's the INHUMANS series?
To iFanboy, the comic book discussion show. My name is Connor. I'm here with...
I'm Ron.
And I am Josh. We wanted to take some time and talk about Marvel Knights. What is funny about that?
Your voice cracked.
Josh is a big boy.
People are like, oh, these guys, they must be all good friends and everything.
No.
They're jackals. They're evil, evil people. We are going to push through. We're talking about Marvel Knights, which 1998, Marvel Knights came out. And it's important because it has a lot to do with how Marvel is today, I think. And for us, this were a real turning point, I think, in comics and Marvel comics especially. So why don't we start by talking about what it was like?
Because I was in the trenches. I was there. I was collecting the comics in the 90s. Marvel, we talked about it in previous episodes, and a lot of people know it's very well known. Marvel Comics hit a bit of a financial problem in the mid to late 90s. The bottom fell out in the comic industry. There's some shady deals going on, some tycoons arguing over assets, heroes' worlds. But what happened was that Marvel went into Chapter 11 and went into bankruptcy. And while that period happened, they continued to put out comics. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Bob Harras was the editor-in-chief. And Bob Harras, he kind of came to power in the early 90s through the X-Men titles. He was the X-Men editor, and he was wildly successful at managing all the X-Men books. So, of course, when Tom DeFalco, I think, stepped down from editor-in-chief, they gave him the keys to the kingdom, and he was managing the Marvel line. Wasn't as good or successful as he was in
Maybe because Jim Lee wasn't drawing every book?
Possibly.
Like having Michael Jordan on your best team.
Right.
He's such a great coach.
So Phil Jackson actually is an excellent coach.
Maybe not. That's debatable.
Then he got Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. Okay, either way.
So right around 1997, 1998, Marvel, it wasn't putting out the best stuff. There were little nuggets of greatness, like Mark Waid, Ron Garney on Captain America. There was Joe Casey and Ladrone on Cable. There were these little...
But for the most part, it was not good quality.
It was not good, consistent quality, and it was also not good. Like, we're talking, we're in the middle of the Spider Clone saga with Spider-Man.
Well, the other thing is, I feel like they were trying to keep one foot in the past and one foot going forward, and so, like, at the same time that you had Daredevil 1 come out, Spider-Man Chapter 1 by John Byrne had come out, which was a horrific step backwards.
Yeah.
But it's still, at the time, I was buying hardly any Marvel because they just weren't good and I wasn't tied to the books, but something had to happen. Something needed to be done.
And so you had, like I mentioned, you had some talent, in Marvel. You had Ed McGuinness and you had Chris Bachalo and stuff like that, guys drawing some stuff, but there really wasn't a lot of buzz. At the same time, Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti were self-publishing. They had both worked for Marvel in the early 90s. They worked for DC. Joe Quesada did the Bat Armor, Azrael as Bats. And
but didn't Quesada draw X Factor?
Quesada drew, he did some X Factor.
I remember buying
and then he did some Valiant.
He
worked on the Valiant title line, and by this time in the late 90s, him and his partner Jimmy Palmiotti, who was inking him, were doing event comics, and not actually like event comics.
Right.
They're publishing.
Ironic.
It is. It's called event comics, and they were seeing a lot of indie book success with a title called Ash, which was about.
It was all over the place when they.
Yeah, it was huge. Remember that? Yeah, I have a couple issues. And what they were doing is they were taking the same kind of approach Image Comics did, where they were using advanced coloring, really high quality paper. Making a really good comic product, and they were publishing that, and had a lot of buzz going through it. And then somehow they were able to strike a deal with Marvel to say, hey, let us take our studio, our event studio, and give us a couple titles that aren't selling very well, and let us produce them. Let's do that.
Which hadn't been done.
It was the first time ever in Marvel history that they outsourced a single comic, much less multiple comics, to another studio. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit of a gamble. They gave the first 4 titles they gave them were all underperforming or canceled titles at the time. Mm-hmm. So you had The Punisher, which had been canceled 2 or 3 years before. You had Daredevil, which was on the verge of cancellation. Yep. We're coming out of the Daredevil Matt Murdock mecha armor.
Yeah, awful time.
Inhumans, which never really had an ongoing title.
Never had a book.
And the 4th one was
Black Panther.
Black Panther, who at the time didn't have an ongoing title.
Right.
So
they took these and they said, we're going to get huge people to work on them, and of course their big get was Kevin Smith writing Daredevil, who in 1998 Kevin Smith was.
This is coming off of Chasing Amy.
Yeah, I mean he was actually a star then, and people besides college kids knew who he was. It was a big deal. Joe drew the pencils on that, and he's one heck of a penciler.
He was still a big time artist at that point. So it was a big deal that he was drawing it.
Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee. Jay Lee wasn't thought that Jay Lee could do a monthly book at the time.
Yep.
And Christopher Priest and Mark Teixeira on Black Panther. Yep. And we won't talk about the Punisher series.
The Punisher, we talked about that in the Punisher show a couple more months ago now. That was Bernie Wrightson and
Christopher Golden.
Yeah. So.
But they weren't all hits from Marvel Knights. No. But it's funny is that we really do remember the books that were great, and I think that the first one that really stands out when you think of Marvel Knights is Daredevil.
And even before we start talking about Daredevil, it's like the whole line itself visually looked different than what was happening at the time.
It was a step forward.
Yeah, they had a common cover treatment. Every book
had their own little unique logo, and the thing is, it wasn't so much about the hits or the names; it was the philosophy behind. Yep. What Marvel, I think, forgot was you have to have good people on your books.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You can't just sell them with foil covers. You can't sell them with gimmicks. You have to put quality artists on the books, and so they did that. They took appropriate people. You take the right guys for the right books, you put them on those books.
And they made people excited about the creator coming first, almost the Vertigo model of these are really talented people telling stories with these characters. And, the enthusiasm was on all the pages for these.
Right, and they basically the philosophy of make good comics.
Yeah.
I think they were trying not to make good comics, but whatever the formula was.
Well, it wasn't, comics were products before this largely. And this was no, we're going to make really good, we're going to make comics that we're really proud of, not just stuff that people will buy.
Yeah, a decision that would be Bob Harris's undoing.
Perhaps.
But, okay, so Daredevil.
Kevin Smith's Daredevil, much fanfare, and I remember this very fondly. I remember reading this and just thinking, I have never read a comic book that looked this good, that was this much fun to read. Yeah. It was by somebody.
I remember the day this came out. I remember being in the store. Yeah. We were all there. I remember we all picked it up.
In college.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It also, they had an adult sensibility, I suppose. It's so interesting because when you say mature adult,
when you say adult, you assume porno.
But it's not that. It's
a mature themed book.
Yeah, it dealt with issues of
religion
and infidelity, and Karen Page comes back and she has AIDS because she was a hooker.
Yeah.
And
heroin addicted.
And then Foggy cheats on his girlfriend and gets caught because of a demon who was masquerading as a woman. There was all of this plot going on. I almost think, though, going back, that what I remember is the visual look of it. These pages are so packed, and Quesada's got this really interesting combination of his own style, which was sort of like a little of that Image and like Todd McFarlane style, but also mixed with some of the sort of Frank Miller Daredevil kind of things. There's lots of blacks, and it's raining all the time. It's just very...
And just slightly cartoony.
Yeah, but in a good way. Mm-hmm. I went back and reread them. They're really wordy.
Yeah, I was gonna say Kevin Smith isn't light on the words.
No,
he's never been, and he never will.
No,
he's still now.
Yeah. However, being a more seasoned comic book reader now, that I had a harder time getting through it. It was a little much.
Yeah.
There would be pages. There's a page where some old man with a mustache comes to explain to him that there's a baby. I mean, there's too much plot for us to have time to explain.
Yeah.
And the page where he's explaining who he is and his people are. It really sounds, there's a lot there. And a lot of times it sounds like he wrote Mephisto, and he had Mephisto say things that the girlfriend from Clerks would say.
Yeah.
I can spot it and I can pick it out now. Yeah. At the time, it was very exciting. This is also when Kevin Smith got known for not being able to finish books on time.
Was it really? I thought this was...
No, Daredevil wasn't like that.
No. Well, no, 4 or 5, the last few of them.
No, I'm pretty sure Daredevil was pretty solid.
No, there was a big delay between 5 and 7. I heard
really?
in there. Oh yeah, I remember. Well, but that was because that was only he did 8 issues.
Yeah.
And then I think David Mack took over.
Yeah, well, there was a weird. there was the Bob Gale.
Oh right,
yeah.
That was good. And never released that.
And then David Mack, and then that led into Brian Bendis.
Right. Which is still going.
Then it switches to. Yeah. I mean, it switches out of Marvel Knights.
Well, that's what happens eventually.
Yeah.
It's a good series. It's not sort of as good as I remember, but at the time, it was exactly what I wanted to read. You know what I mean? It was. At the time, this was great comics.
It's perfect for you because you're 20 or however 21, and that's what everybody loved Kevin Smith at that point. So.
It also
and Daredevil was like we said, was a maligned character. Like we all knew about how great the Frank Miller stuff was, but at that time I wasn't reading Daredevil.
I read Daredevil all through who wrote those? Ennis wrote some.
Ennis with John Romita on art.
David
John Romita Jr.
Did Nicolini write those? Anyway, but I read them all, and they were not good by the end. You were absolutely right. Yeah. And they were kind of like the enthusiasm was waning on them.
But what this did though was it took everything that was good about the Frank Miller stuff and all that, and it set up the character who is still today moping. I mean, but there is a straight line. One thing this did for me was, and I know that I hadn't been reading when Frank Miller did his books, so Bullseye was not a character that I knew terribly well.
His badassness.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I first met Bullseye, and I've read the Frank Miller stuff since then, and it worked. I mean, he kills a nun with his teeth. I mean, it's just
great.
I remember that. Yeah.
It's nuts.
So Daredevil was probably the best title coming out of Marvel Knights, but there was one title that you fell in love with, and we're going to talk about that after the break.
This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by GoDaddy.com. Web hosting from GoDaddy.com includes 99.9% uptime, 24/7 support, and free access to Hosting Connection, the place to install over 30 free applications sure to help you get the most from your hosting plan and website. If you want to make an impact online, GoDaddy.com has what you need. .com names for as low as $1.99, plus world-class hosting, fast and easy website builders, and much, much more. Please support our sponsors by checking out GoDaddy.com and using the coupon code iFanboy to get 10% off your purchase and to let them know that we sent you.
Hey, it's Ron, and I'm here at the Revision 3 studio here in San Francisco at the Revision 3 headquarters, and I just want to take a quick second to ask you a favor. We're doing a survey to get your opinion of our show, Revision 3 in general, and the way you like to watch internet TV, and some information about you. These surveys help us get more information about our audience. It helps us make better shows and give you a better product. So if you have a couple of minutes, head over to revision3.com/iFanboy survey. It shouldn't take very long, and if you take the whole survey, at the very end of it, you can see a little sneak preview of a show that we're working on. We'd love to get your feedback about that as well. So head over to revision3.com/iFanboy survey. Thanks, and back to the show.
So while we were gone, we looked it up, and turns out you were right.
Ooh.
Kevin Smith's run on Daredevil was plagued by delays.
It's really interesting that you don't remember
I don't recall it at all.
I mean, because
that's a hot button with me.
Civil War.
Right, but the thing is that
I mean, if I say that to you, the first thing you think of is delay.
Yeah, but the comic delays thing, I think, started
with the internet.
With the internet and with that, and it wasn't as we didn't know when something was delayed. You just
didn't care really. You were too busy having fun.
So speaking of delays, Jay Lee, as an artist, takes a long time to do an issue.
He's a perfectionist.
And at that point, his big claim to fame was Hellshock at Image, which just never came out.
I think his big claim to fame was Namor.
Oh, really? I always thought of Hellshock.
John Byrne's Namor, yeah.
Okay, but anyway. So Marvel Knights takes yet another risk by teaming Paul Jenkins up with Jay Lee to do Inhumans.
Paul Jenkins had been doing Hellblazer, I believe, before this, and so not your typical Marvel guy, because you see a lot of crossover now, but again, you didn't then, I guess. The dude who did, Neil Gaiman wasn't going to do Marvel books, but of course now he does, sometimes. Inhumans #1, I don't remember if I liked the Inhumans before this. I think it was one of those things I was like, they're just interesting for whatever reason. But this is a 12-issue maxi series, which to this day is still one of my favorite series. It's sort of 12 perfect issues of this really interesting society within society. The Inhumans are this little closed-off group, and they're not humans. They're Inhumans, and they have their own ways, and they live beneath a protective bubble on Atlantis at this point. They move to the blue area of the moon later or before.
After.
Yeah.
Yep.
They came from Jack Kirby in Fantastic Four, and he'd always wanted to do a series with them, and he never got to. And what this is some humans decide to attack the Inhumans because they don't know what's going on. They're mysterious. We don't know anything about them. They won't communicate with us, so let's blow them up. Yeah. And Black Bolt's thing, of course, is Black Bolt has the voice of a bomb. He can't say anything.
He's the king of the Inhumans.
He's the king, so he can't say anything. And the whole theme through the whole thing is he's not doing anything. He's saying he's just hold him off. We're not. He doesn't say that. But
what I loved about this series was Maximus, his brother, who is the villain of the series.
Yes.
His crazy brother, who they keep locked up.
It's like Aquaman.
But that really, because I only knew of the Inhumans from Fantastic Four with limited stuff. This really delved into their culture and the Terrigen Mists and how they get their powers.
And each issue sort of explored a different thing. Like the beginning is introductory, is sort of you get to know Black Bolt a little bit, and then a later issue explores how when the Inhuman children hit puberty, basically, they go to get exposed to the Terrigen mists, which unlock their genetic power, and what that means, and it's.
I just hear exposed to children and like go another way.
Yeah, and it's about. It's a metaphor for puberty, actually.
Yeah.
You know, so like the girl comes out and she's got all green, scaly skin, and you think that she's going to be unhappy about it. But she's thrilled because she has wings also, and she's like, oh my God, she's a flyer. And it's also a society of caste. So there's the people who work the machines and everything, the alpha primitives. And it's just this really interesting exploration of stuff, but it's also a family because the royal family are all, you know, and there's
Karnak.
Yeah, Karnak and Gorgon, and they've all got their things going on, and
it's great. I mean, it's filled with politics. It's filled with, you know, like it was a really good. I can't imagine it sold very well, but
I'm sure it has
lack
by now.
of another series.
Yeah, I'm sure it has by now. But the thing is, I don't think anybody's been able to do this as well.
Yeah, Jay Lee's art is beautiful.
Was this the pinnacle of not only the Inhumans with Jenkins and those guys?
This is the best thing that I've ever read that Paul Jenkins has ever done. It's the best thing I've ever read that Jay Lee's ever done. Jay Lee, you know, I'm
Dark
not.
Tower stuff is
The
pretty.
Dark Tower stuff is cool, but it's not what I'm into.
Yeah.
So. And I've read through the first stuff, and it was good. And his art is beautiful, but it was hard for me to get into it because it's just not my thing so much.
Yeah.
So he hasn't really done anything since then that I've been able to get into, and I've looked for it. I've been waiting for that next Jay Lee project that I'm gonna love.
Right.
But there's literally not a moment of this that isn't amazing now.
Yeah.
It's still that good.
So that first wave of books gonna come out, and we talked about the Punisher on the Punisher show, but then there was also the Black Panther.
Black Panther is still going. I mean, basically, like there was Christopher Priest had a very long run based on that. The
Great character design. They added the teeth kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was really, really good.
I've read a couple of them. Yeah. It's funny because it has like the Black Panther as an ambassador, like going around New York trying to solve a crime, and it's kind of funny and it's kind of modern, and it's the artwork really interesting, the Texiera art. I haven't seen anything that looked like it, but it went on for a long time, and it's a very critically lauded run.
That was one of those critically lauded nobody bought books.
Yeah, exactly. And that was interesting, because the books, while Daredevil was very successful and brought Daredevil back to the forefront, a lot of these books didn't sell very well. You know, and it's interesting to see how the influence of doing those books had on them. After those initial first 4 books, they came out with they started coming out with more titles, and that led us to Garth Ennis' Punisher with Steve Dillon, which we also talked about on the Punisher show, which is probably one of this is captured all here in the omnibus brick, but which is one of the best, if you ask me, the redefining of the Punisher character through that work.
And I was so excited that Jenkins and Jay Lee were going to get back together to do a new book about a new character called the Sentry.
A new old character.
If you've listened to our audio show or you've heard us talk about we're not terribly big fans of the Sentry. I read this. It's a gorgeous book again. It wasn't good to be.
Well, there's a gimmick. This is kind of when things soured slightly with Marvel Knights. Is that the gimmick was, here's this character called the Sentry. He was created by Stan Lee.
But never used.
Never used. They discovered him in the vault, the Marvel vault.
Well, there's an interview with Stan Lee in the back of it.
Right. Well, there was a whole.
However, as we learned earlier this year, Stan Lee has no idea who the Sentry is.
The character the Sentry, which is a fairly new character in Marvel.
The Sentry?
The Sentry, the yellow costume.
So they did a whole campaign with Wizard Magazine in cahoots with it, and everybody claiming this lost character Stan Lee's found, and they were going to reintroduce him to the Marvel Universe, and then this is what we got, and it was just awful.
You know what? To me, it wasn't even that awful at that point. It was a grand experiment that I think didn't necessarily work.
Yes.
But I really applaud the effort.
The attempt.
The attempt.
No,
I
hated the idea of trying to shoehorn him into the history of the Marvel Universe.
But the thing is, I think that where it went sour for me was, I don't mind that they tried it. It's always good to try new things. Where it went wrong for me is that he's still around.
They just don't stop.
And I think that that's really the problem. Like this, I can't fault them for trying a thing. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Fine. But like the fact that he's like on the new Avengers still, it's weird. But I don't know. Maybe somebody out there likes him.
I don't fault them for introducing a new character. I fault them for trying to pull one over on everybody and force something into the history of the Marvel. The history should be unbroken.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I've hated the Sentry. But so as this Sentry came out in 2000, so this the Marvel Knights line has been around for a few years at this point, and then kind of change happens, and as we alluded to earlier, Bob Harras leaves the editor-in-chief post.
Well, that's the most horrible thing about the whole thing is that Bob Harras makes this decision, this landmark decision. I'm going to let these guys
run with it. Give them the ball. Here's the ball.
And look what happens.
And they took it. So
which was his job.
Bill Jemas becomes the publisher of Marvel Comics. The whole financial stuff goes out of the way. Bob Harras is out. Joe Quesada slides in as the editor-in-chief. And basically what the approach to Marvel Knights became the approach to the entire Marvel line.
Which you're seeing today.
Right.
And hire great talent, put great artists on it, keep the quality of the production really high. There was all sorts of other Marvel Knights series, Black Widow, gorgeous looking stuff.
The blonde Black Widow, remember that?
Jay Lee did Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4 with Grant Morrison writing it. Marvel Boy by Grant Morrison, J.G. Jones.
Yep.
Just all these beautiful, memorable things that actually a lot of them are hard to find these days.
Yeah, they're really, really good.
Which is weird. That's unusual.
Yeah.
You think that Marvel would reprint all their stuff?
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. Yeah.
But really, if you love Marvel books now and the high quality of writing and the talent and all the people doing the books and the high quality of the paper, it's all because of this.
Yeah.
Because this changed the philosophy. The philosophy of these books became the company philosophy.
Yeah.
And it really, people may not, who came in later, Marvel sucked in the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, the quality of the product and everything was just not good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But now, this is because of Joe Quesada, because of Jimmy Palmiotti. All the grief Quesada gets, you have to respect his. The books you like now are because of what he did with Marvel Knights.
And at the time that he was doing it, he's penciling the book.
Yeah.
Jimmy Palmiotti was inking all of the stuff.
His wife is editing.
They did all the letter columns.
It was a true team effort. And what was really interesting is that so Quesada becomes editor-in-chief, and you'd think, okay, at that point, well, the whole Marvel Knights will go away, but it didn't. They kept it around as an imprint. And when we come back, we'll tell you what happened to it after that.
Thanks to Netflix for sponsoring this episode of iFanboy. With Netflix, you can rent over 100,000 titles online with free shipping both ways to your home. They have over 40 shipping centers, so almost all deliveries happen within just one business day. If you have an Xbox 360, they're streaming to that. If you have a PlayStation 3, then you can get Blu-ray titles. So there's all sorts of ways that you can use Netflix. The Netflix plans start from just $4.99. As a new member, you can get a free, no-risk 2-week trial. Check it out at www.netflix.com/iFanboy, and don't forget to use that www when using that code.
You and Joe did Marvel Knights together, and I really do you get the sense that that changed a lot of what came after it?
I think it changed everything that came after it, because if you look at the books before Marvel Knights, the coloring wasn't as good, the stories were a little different, less intense, and I think I'm saying this, I'm sure there was a lot of stuff going on that I don't realize, but we brought the attitude of event comics into Marvel Knights, where let's pay for better colorists, let's get the right writer for the right characters, and not just put a guy that we have on the contract to write that book. So we Kevin Smith on Daredevil with me and Joe made sense. Christopher Priest and Tex on Black Panther made sense. Jay Lee and Jenkins, that's a no-brainer.
Was the best thing ever.
INHUMANS, thanks. And it made sense. So we started looking at the books, the characters, saying, what would match up perfectly? Garth and Steve Dillon on Punisher. It makes sense. So we kind of brought that sensibility, and I think now, since Joe's been there, I think we just changed a lot of the way Marvel comics were done. Now all the books, they can't have Marvel Knights anymore because every book became Marvel Knights in a weird way. And I left I was there 2 years. When I finally saw that I did everything I could, I bailed. I just said, all right, time for me to go on to something else, and Joe went into editor-in-chief. So it was really a perfect time for us to go. I think we really made a difference with the company. We changed a lot of things, and I think good things came out of it.
So the imprint Marvel Knights is still around, and it's a little different now. In early 2006.
Well, no, even before that. So basically, it's kind of taking 3 evolutionary steps. When it started, it was in continuity stories, focusing on these kind of offbeat characters. Mm-hmm. Then Quesada takes over editor-in-chief. They keep Marvel Knights. The stories are the second kind of phase is still in continuity, but kind of vanity projects. Mark Miller's Spider-Man project, or the Madrox miniseries that Peter David did, kind of noir. So it was an opportunity to tell stories of these characters that were still in continuity, but were a little off the beaten path or a little off the
outside of the box. We have more cliches that we can apply to this.
Exactly. But then the real evolution came in 06.
Right, when Quesada basically said, all of the ongoing series are going to move to the Marvel Universe proper, and everything that happens within Marvel Knights now are going to be limited edition or miniseries, but they're evergreen properties, things that aren't in continuity, that can sort of live forever, and from that you get all the color titles, the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, Spider-Man Blue, Daredevil Yellow, Hulk Gray?
Yep.
Hulk Gray.
Captain America White, which is coming up.
Captain America White, other things like Spider-Man Rain, the Kara Andrews.
Yep.
Silver Surfer Requiem.
Yep.
The Kaczynski.
Captain America, The Chosen.
The Chosen, correct.
Which, with Mitch Breitweiser did the art.
Yep.
And that, I remember when that came out, we got into a lot of arguments because it was right around the time of the death of Captain America.
Yeah, everybody thought.
And we're like, wait, and that was the moment where we kind of said, wait, and the same thing with Silver Surfer Requiem, because Silver Surfer Requiem has Silver Surfer dying. Yeah. And so we're like, wait, is this in continuity or not? And that's when we got to define that these stories are not in continuity, but they're standalone stories that speak to the vision of the character.
Right.
So, and there's some good stuff that's come out of it. I mean, that's Captain America: The Chosen is pretty good. A lot of people love Silver Surfer Requiem. What was the one? Oh, the Spider-Man Reign with Kara Andrews was supposed to be like the Dark Knight for Spider-Man, but it didn't really resonate.
It's nice looking.
Yeah.
It was very nice looking.
Yeah. But some neat stuff comes out of it now, and it's an opportunity to do something a little different. You were describing it. It's somewhere in between.
It's like between Marvel Universe and Marvel Max. Max is adult comics,
but also out of continuity.
Yeah, but it sort of exists between this. It's funny because they actually found a way for Marvel Knights to keep going. Yeah. Because the thing is, when Quesada was editor in chief and doing everything, there wasn't much of a need for it because they're not mature comics necessarily. They don't have swearing in them. They don't have all sorts of gruesome shit.
But they're not for kids.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But this is a step forward with Marvel. They took from the goofy mid time to.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a great achievement. I mean, like we said, it changed the face of Marvel and kind of paved the way for Quesada's reign as editor in chief, which has been, despite One More Day, has been a great reign. I mean, he's a great editor in chief, and he's really
absolutely
kind of steered the company in the right. Obviously, by the sales numbers,
Do you like One More Day?
No, I like Brand New Day. I didn't like One More Day.
This is another
show. You can't like one without the other.
I like Brand New Day. I can. It's another show. Yeah.
I don't know, you can.
Anyway,
he just did though.
I don't. Yeah, but he does lots of things that are wrong.
So if there was a Marvel Knights title that you liked that we didn't talk about or anything, shoot us an email, contact@ifanboy.com. Tell us what you think of Marvel Knights as a line or Quesada as an editor.
You can give us a call at 1-888-FANBOYS, which is 326-2697. You can tell us about your favorite Marvel Knights books or whatever.
As always, if you're watching this, you either went to revision3.com/ifanboy or to ifanboy.com, where you can comment on this. You can look at all the other stuff we have going on, the audio podcast, and all sorts of great things that we put there every single day. And there's your show.
In the interview with Stan Lee, Joe Quesada says, "How did Sentry come about?" And Stan says, "Hey, you know better than I. You tell him." He says
Didn't fart.
Just so you know. Should we turn the TV off, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Just in case we want to watch something. Go on. Hold on, wait. Oh shit, MacGyver's on. Just roll tape. Roll tape. Awesome.
All right, ready?
You can't not do it.
That's awesome.
Awesome. MacGyver was awesome. You watched MacGyver.
We did for years. All right. All right, ready?
It's awesome.
In 3,
Love it.
2,